Hi again, welcome to this episode going over how to use Flix with StoryBoard Pro. The first thing we'll do is understand how to bring your StoryBoard Pro sequences into Flix. Here I'm going to be using the same sequence as the last episode. We also have a simple camera move in this project, so we'll see how that can be brought in as well. The main difference with using StoryBoard Pro is that until you're ready to push the sequence back into Flix, you'll be working on this application. Once we're finished working on the sequence, importing the panels into Flix is extremely simple. First, make sure you have this project saved. Next, we're going to create a new sequence in Flix. We'll call this 0020, and once we're in the sequence, select StoryBoard Pro Import. From here, we'll need to specify the project path, which is the path to the SBoard file. You can also write a comment to describe this version or to indicate that it's coming from StoryBoard Pro. Before bringing this project into Flix, we'll first set up the StoryBoard Pro settings. And these settings are under Third-Party Apps, StoryBoard Pro. Point to the StoryBoard Pro executable, and under Import, there's the option to specify how the panels which contain camera moves will be imported into Flix. We can either hold the first frame, which will import the panel as a single still frame, or render all frames. It's worth knowing, if you're bringing in all the frames, that the import will take a little bit more time, since it'll be calculating all the images. For now, we're going to select Hold First Frame. Once done, we can import the project. Select Import. This operation will take a couple of minutes, but once done, we can go into the sequence and see the iteration we've just created. We now have, in this iteration, the panels from StoryBoard Pro, along with the camera moves. As you can see, the first frame was rendered into this thumbnail. However, if we open this image, for example with Photoshop, we can still have access to the whole image. So this is very non-destructive. If later down the line we want to change the camera move, then we have the ability to go back to the original image and make these changes. We can also see that markers have been created as well. This will be known in StoryBoard Pro as scene numbers, and this will be brought into Flix. The timing of the panels are also the same than in StoryBoard Pro. We've now just successfully brought in our first iteration of the sequence. So what happens after your second iteration? Let's go back into StoryBoard Pro and make a few changes. We'll change the camera move, a few positioning of the characters. We can add some panels. I'll also change the timing of this first panel and make it a lot shorter. So we're now ready to bring the second iteration back into Flix. We can save this project by overwriting the previous version, so Flix will store all the panels and sequence revisions. So if you've been used to saving out multiple folders and versioning your work with StoryBoard Pro, you don't need to worry about that when working with Flix. In Flix, go back into the sequence level and select StoryBoard Pro Import. This is now our second iteration for the sequence. Specify the project path and we can add a comment. Once done, go into this revision and we can now see that the timing for the first panel has changed. These kinds of changes don't impact the image itself. The image is identical, so a new iteration of this panel will not be created. Flix will only iterate on a panel if it sees a change with the image or the framing. In this case, we have an iteration for this panel and can find the previous version by selecting the bar at the bottom. So at all times, we can see the history of a panel and go back to a previous iteration. We can also find the new panel we created in StoryBoard Pro, which has its own panel ID. If these numbers confuse you, please watch the next episode where I'll explain this behavior. And finally, we can see the change in our camera move. If you want to bring in all the frames, go into File, Preferences, and in StoryBoard Pro Settings, select Render All Frames. The next time we import a camera move, this panel will now be animated. And this icon will indicate that this panel is animated. If you open this file with Photoshop, we can still have access to the whole canvas. So in some cases, camera moves will be modified in editorial, so this ensures that we'll have the tools we need if we need to change it further down the line. The next thing we'll import into Flix is a dialog. So if you have any dialog in StoryBoard Pro, this will also be picked up by Flix and the dialog will appear in the preview window. So we just had an overview of the integration going from StoryBoard Pro into Flix. The last thing we'll cover in this episode is how the integration will work from Flix towards StoryBoard Pro. One great thing about Flix is that it's a great conforming tool. Its aim is to bring story artists, production coordinators, editors, all in the same place where they can share feedback and comments. So naturally, Flix will be used to make changes to the story, for example, the timing or positioning of the panels. So in this example, we will add a dialogue, as well as change the timing of the first few panels, and we're using the recording tool to do that. We'll cover this tool in more depth in the next episode, but this will enable you to control the timing of each panel directly with the arrow keys. Now that the panels have seen a change in timing, we will export the changes we've made. To export this using StoryBoard Pro, change the sketching app to StoryBoard Pro in the preferences. Once done, we can double-click on a panel and a window will pop up. Click Export, and this window will give us a path to the XML, as well as instructions as to how you can use this to update your StoryBoard Pro project. Select on this icon to copy the path. In StoryBoard Pro, go into File, Confirmation, Import Animatic Project. We can now paste the path we've just copied, and since we don't have audio, we'll untick this box. It's worth knowing that if you're bringing audio from Flix, if there are multiple tracks, they will be flattened into one. So if you have multiple audio tracks, it's recommended to untick this box as well, so that you're only bringing in the panels. Finally, select Import to import these changes from Flix. This has updated the timings of each panel, as well as the dialogue added previously. To wrap up this episode, let's quickly reiterate some of the benefits of using StoryBoard Pro with Flix. First of all, easily view previous versions at a sequence level and at a panel level. Secondly, if you're used to saving versions of your projects with StoryBoard Pro, using Flix eliminates the need to do that. Because these project folders can be so heavy, the use of Flix will actually save a lot of space and time, because A, you can easily find previous versions directly in Flix, and B, Flix will only import panels that have seen changes. So this will save a lot of space and help you stay organized. The next benefit is that you can easily make modifications to your projects and not worry about conforming them every time there's a change. And finally, using Flix will improve communication with other departments and team members. The subject of communication now brings us to our next episode, where we will explore how the Flix tools can improve our workflow outside of the integrations with either Photoshop or StoryBoard Pro.